Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It is the only way to start your day. 9 minutes after 8 o'clock, and getting into the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. And even as we do, look, education is hitting us everywhere. Who's going to school, who's not going to school, where should you go, funding models, etc., and you're confused about how do I get into a university education, right? And in terms of what options are available, what can I do if I want to study abroad? Who should I speak to? Most times you speak to a run-of-the-mill guy who tells, hey, you want to go to university? I know the perfect, come, let me show you. You've been scammed of, I don't know, however many shillings. I can get you a visa. It doesn't happen. I can get you this, that, the other happen. Cradle has decided, you know what? We can actually, and this is why they were established, we can actually make this work for you. That we've made matches with some of the best universities around the world, in some countries that you would have a pleasant time learning in. And you can actually then, make use of all the options that are available to you. And they've said, what you do is you eliminate this whole thing of the possibility of you being scammed. You eliminate this huge, database of choices, and you don't know which one, because they can match you and your desires to universities in certain countries, and then you have a much smaller number to pick from. And they've also realized that they can use science and technology to make sure that you have those options at your fingertips. They've been able to put all of this together in the Study Abroad World Fair, which takes place on the 31st of August. That's the day after tomorrow, which is Saturday, in Parklands at the Gallant Mall from 11 to 4 p.m., from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So universities from different countries will be on display, and they'll showcase everything about themselves. You can apply for admission and get it on the spot. You can talk to a visa officer who'll tell you what you need to do. You can apply for scholarships and get them. You can also then make sure that your accommodation and all of this is set up. So imagine walking in on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. and walking out at 4 p.m. with all that you need in tow for university education. And that is brought to you courtesy of Cradle. You need to register first, though, www.cradle.com, or call 0799 000 444. So let's do that on Saturday, shall we? There's your plot for the weekend. Okay, we're getting into an education conversation. We were supposed to have the senator for Kiambu County. He was supposed to be here this morning. We cannot find him. And we know we mentioned that this morning, Karogo Thangwa, and he was supposed to be here, but we can't seem to. Maybe he will walk into the room at some point, but let's wait and see. There is still so much around education that needs to be discussed. The Standard calls it a nightmare for schools, as TSC now warns teachers that in this whole war, there are very many things that are going on, little battles. I think of the world wars, and even with the world wars, there were many little battles that were happening in different places, and if you conquered here, you were able to conquer to the next. If you conquered here, you conquered to the next. But there's so many pots boiling in this education conversation right now, and the question is, what is going to knock the stalemate? Who is going to be the first one to bow? I don't think we should run away from certain facts. And when we look at them, they're on the table. It's not opinion. It's not romanticizing an idea. They're facts. In order for you to have a CBA essentially is a documentation of a working relationship that two sides, not more, two sides, it's not tripartite, it's two sides, have come together to agree on. That something wasn't quite working. And so one party decided they were going to withdraw services. And when they do that, it's clear and apparent that there needs to be a conversation at the table to agree what you will do in the future. Now, when you arrive at a CBA, what you do is that you set the parameters through which you are going to function and practice over the next, period of time. And within that period, they've also given you time to enact certain things. If you're going to increase salary, do that. Not just increase it, but pay it. If you're going to say that certain emoluments will then be established, then you have those 4 years to do that. If you're going to say you're going to hire more, do that. If you're going to say you're going to establish paternity leave for your male teachers, wherever, do that. If you're going to make sure that those who are in volatile areas then have their allowances sorted, all of these things come into a CBA. Now, everybody leaves the table agreeing that this CBA, good? Yes, let's go. So then that is what forms the basis for a return to work formula. You go back to work, everybody is happy, with the hope that over those 4 years, you will enact the elements of this collective bargaining agreement. It is basically a contract. And the contract is what? It is binding. Somewhere along the line, either you forgot, or the CBA bored you, or you felt that the people that you signed this thing with have forgotten and that they're no longer interested in some of the elements that I don't know. But somewhere along the line, you failed to activate the things that you have agreed on. And so the people who you were in agreement with decide to do what? Withdraw their services. This is exactly what has happened here. That the teachers have said, what you said you would do, you have not done. And because of that, we are going to withdraw our services. Which puts us in the situation which we are in now. Third term has begun. Teachers have said, it cannot be us. We cannot go back to school at this point. Until you do what you said you will do. This matter now has escalated, where schools have opened. KCSC candidates will sit an exam in 9 short weeks. In about 9 short weeks is when they will begin, 10 weeks or so. Teachers are not on board in many schools. The TSC has now come back and said, you will go back to school, or we will fault you for absenteeism and ask you to show cause. That is the playground, or rather, that is the ground, and that is how things have been set. Who should do what at this point?
Well, I should tell you a proverb. Shouldn't I?
Well, we were going to see if the senator would come, but...
Let him come when he comes.
Okay, so tell us the proverb, and then we will go into
When
this
he comes,
conversation.
we will repeat the proverb for his sake. Won't we?
Yes, we will.
Yes. Cross the loud river and don't cross the silent one.
Cross the loud river and don't cross the silent one. You don't know what lurks beneath.
No, you do not.
So the one that's making noise is going to show you everything about itself just by the fact that it's tripping and falling over the rocks, and you can hear the sound of the water.
Or it's a dip and there's somewhere it's dropping and falling into. You will definitely hear it.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't step into that which is unknown. Okay.
You know, the thing about let me backtrack. There was a gentleman who was a student of psychology. When I say student, I mean somebody who studies a certain subject or discipline and over time comes up with certain definitions that are then related to his name because they represent a certain reality in that field. This person was called Pavlov.
Yes.
Conditioning, it is called. Pavlov experimented with the dogs. Gave a dog a certain meal at a certain time, and it would salivate in anticipation of that meal. Even when the meal was not there, the dog would anticipate.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it knew that at a certain point in time, there was a reward for it. So, the first point of giving that particular dog or those dogs the meal at a particular time set in motion consequences that were later to happen.
Yep.
So that on that hour, the dogs would anticipate. The dogs were conditioned.
They know it's coming.
They knew, they expected, even though it wasn't coming, but they were ready for it. Now, when you look at the discussions we're having about industrial action in this country, the outcomes and discussions around it, what you've just mentioned is the one point that is always left out of that discussion.
Right.
That the industrial action is taking place because there was an understanding and agreement that was not met. Simple. Nothing else. People agreed And they gave time. Industrial action, you give notice. All this was done. But because what was agreed upon was not met, and agreed upon not with a handshake. No. Every legal step was taken. The I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. And it was even registered in court. So, meaning this thing was ironclad. And then you find a situation where somebody has not met it, and then they take the position that you are wrong. Just pause here. We see this action, but what has brought it about?
I don't think that teachers finished second term and they were on recess for 3 weeks and they said, we're bored.
No.
Let us say we are going to strike because we don't have anything to do. No. And these waters, like this very loud one, was boiling and simmering, was tripping over the rocks, just like our proverb. It had been, because as is the practice, it is not possible that teachers just woke up and said, we are giving our 7-day notice on a random Tuesday. No, conversations were being had. Hey, hello,
long before the notice.
Absolutely.
Many conversations were had.
Hey, TSC, you've not done this, you've not done the other. How about you get this done? Otherwise, you're going to force us into a situation which is going to be ugly. Ugly is being seen today. Why wouldn't you do what you're supposed to do, is the question.
Yes, and what do we set in motion when we represent ourselves as people who don't keep our promises and as people who disregard any legal understanding or agreement? Because if it isn't just the teachers, the doctors have a similar problem. You will find other sectors of the economy have a similar problem. Why? Promises were made, and any time they are in a tight corner, those who are supposed to keep their end of the bargain, it's called a back-to-work formula.
Yes.
The teachers were teaching. See, what they're saying, we're withdrawing the service we're providing. The understanding with the back-to-work formula was, you go back to work, we'll fulfill.
Later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, that later occurred, and then another later occurred, and said, guys, on this matter, several years have gone by. And it appears that this thing isn't really going to be fulfilled. So what should we do? No, you go back to work, then we talk. I said, but look, we did agree on this, did we not? How is it that every time I ask you to meet your end of the bargain, your response to me is to go back to work? And we even had a back-to-work formula where you said, go back to work and I'll do this. And even the very thing you said you would do, you have not done. So what do you want me to do?
You haven't done. And so the question is, what is going to end this particular stalemate? The Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, as well as the Kenya National Union of Teachers representatives, might be with us tomorrow. But then the question that we start to ask ourselves is, even before they give their sides of what they're asking for, what they're pushing for, is that if you have a nation within which a right that you're supposed to give to its children is not met, then you have a problem. Whether it is a commission that's handling affairs, whether it is an independent bodies which are handling those affairs, or whether it is a direct activation by the Ministry of Education, you've got a problem here. And so what are you going to do to resolve it? The call that we have seen by TSC is that they've ordered the officers to go around the country, or rather in the areas which they are domiciled, and to basically have a call sheet, a rota, and say, if you didn't show up to work today, we're going to put a big fat tick behind your name, and then we're going to give you a show cause letter to essentially show cause as to why you didn't come to work, as though it were not evident. Now, when you go to court and you get a court order demanding that these teachers go back to work, what are you doing? Are you using the law to arm twist people to make a decision over one that you went over yourself? And I'm going to fault the TSC here, 100%. Why go into a work or return to work formula if you know very well that you're not going to be able to meet it? And you cannot say that you are hoping in what could happen in the future. Today, as we are now, what can you promise to make sure that it's actually done? And then along the lines, you find that you hit a bump. How about having a conversation? Why do we hate communication so much?
When such questions are asked, there's the assumption that there's an easy response to this one. There could be, but ask yourself for a single second. Does the TSC give itself money? The answer is no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It gets it from the exchequer.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Now, is it that this money was budgeted for? Yes.
Yes.
It was budgeted for. So, where's the kink? Why is it that money that was budgeted for, at least we hope it was?
Or did TSC not tell ministry that they agreed to pay some more money or to make sure that certain things happen. Maybe they didn't pass the message.
By the time something is registered in court,
What do you want me to say?
all the T's have been crossed and all the I's have been dotted. But then, what then do you see? If the money was allocated, where did it go to? Was it diverted? Did it go somewhere where it wasn't supposed to go? The problem is that whatever reason we give, what will become apparent and the direction in which my thinking will go is that these issues of the teachers were not considered important enough.
No. But what are you met with? It's not just teaching. Anybody can teach. If you know you don't want to do then we can get rid of you and we can get somebody else to do the job.
Yes, we can.
That's the escapist.
That's the attitude
that we deal with when we see things like this. Instead of dealing with an uncomfortable situation head on and seeing the ways in which you can sort it out, we want to run away from it and essentially kill a mosquito with a sledgehammer. There are ways.
Did you not see the issue with the doctors? We'll get other doctors from Cuba. You're thinking, guys, for heaven's sake, we have doctors who the government has trained and don't have jobs. They are asking you to meet an obligation. And how do you have money to pay these doctors you want to bring in, but you don't have the money that these doctors want to pay them? What logic is this?
It's not logic. It's total, complete confusion. And you can't tell me that there are folks who sit crunching the numbers, crunching the ideas day after day, morning after morning, and that is the response that you come up with. Well, rather than do what it is that we're supposed to do, how about we get rid of you who is asking for your own rights then to be put forth?
Isn't it bizarre that a person asking for their right is suddenly a villain?
Yeah, and then you're targeted.
Yes, suddenly you are, as we say, the bad person, and you're the person who must be gotten rid of because you are now disturbing the peace. You are doing the very thing that no one wants you to do. How did you get here? How did we get to a position where the consequence of our education as we see it is that the public sector, where for the longest time the vast majority of people have found solace and have gone to get educated, keeps diminishing in terms of value. It's a complete inverse from an earlier time when the place to go to learn was a public school. That was the place to go to learn. Now we've invested completely. I was thinking about this matter yesterday evening, and I was asking myself what it is that gets someone to the point where you're in a position of leadership and the very leadership role that you're supposed to perform and which is demonstrated by the concern and the implementation of things that would actually benefit the citizenry is the least of your concern. Everything else other than that, you do not give a hoot.
I thought before that we were looking at a situation where there was disengagement from priorities, that it was things like this were not being prioritized. And whilst I still think that, I think that in addition to these things not being prioritized, that we've gotten to a place whereby they really are not cared about at all. Because if you did, we would see a very, very different way of doing things. If it was that people cared, I mean, just look at the situation whereby we are in September. Come Tuesday, come Monday, we'll be in September. All right. And KCSE, as we know, is high octane, fast moving. People are stressed. People have been reading for the last 6 months. People want to be able to attain that A, and that they know that the whole of second term going into third term, and then the whole of third term is purely for revision under the guidance of teachers in school, because you're in school while all of this is happening, under the guidance of teachers. What do you think it does? And let's go to the students at this point. What do you think it does for KCSE students, the almost 1 million of them around the country today, for whom majority of them are in public schools, or maybe, a lot of them are in public schools. A lot of them, I'm going to say the majority. I'm not sure about those numbers. But a lot of them are in public schools today.
We've gotten to a point where it's almost at
almost
50-50. Yes.
Right? Teachers who will guide in this revision are not in school today.
No.
1 week down the line. By the way, all this thing that we've been talking, a week has passed. We're going to get to next week. We don't know if the stalemate will have been come over. We don't know. They've got 6 weeks, 7 weeks left in the term at the end of next week. And this hullabaloo still continues. So I keep asking, prioritization of certain things, the very foundational pillars of this society are being knocked down every single day when we ignore what needs to be done. That's what you're doing. You're eroding the very fabric, the very foundational fabric of a nation when things like education and health and their priorities are not met. And we do fanfare and we say a meeting went well into the night where both sides then were not able to agree. What are we talking about? Who's thinking about these kids in school who have things to do? Who's thinking about these kids at school who then will deal with a huge psychological burden where they feel as though they did not get enough time? Those are the questions that we ought to be asking, where people need to take their egos, put them aside, and actually deal with issues head on and sort them out. Why agree to a CBA if you know very well that you're not going to be able to fulfill it?
No, they will not put their egos aside. They won't. And the reason why they won't is because anyone who is in a position of authority and power think they can get away with anything they want to do. So long as they think they can get away, we'll continue seeing this nonsense up until the time when it is clear that you will not get away with it, that you will be held to account. That's when people will do what they're supposed to do. Because remember the discussion we've had around the 650 billion that is allocated to the education sector. Okay? And we asked the question, does all this money actually go into the education sector?
Yeah.
And if it did go, what would we expect to see?
Yeah. If it did go, what would we expect to see?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a break at this point. We're going to open up the phone lines when we come back. And teachers, where are you? What is the issue here? And what is the hope in terms of what can be done? Let's talk about what your position is, what can actually be done, feeling for the students, because we've heard that quite a number of teachers are wishing, we wish you could be in school, but we've also gotten to the point where our needs actually need to be heard. Phone lines will open when we come back from this. It's 8:30.